most of my life. I'd come to believe that I shouldn't have a child of my own, ever, and that when my time on earth was done, there should be no evidence that I was ever here. My name's Mark Goblowsky, and I grew up in Northeast Ohio on the shores of Lake Erie. Small town America for sure. There were a total of 40 people in my graduating class. Great place to grow up though, even though it was small. Beaches being on the lake in the summer was awesome. We grew up in a working class family. My father was a factory worker, and my mom, she was a stay-at-home mother. There were 5 of us kids, and she managed to have all 5 kids in less than 5 years, so 5 of us all under the age of 5, so her hands were full. We may have been borderline poor. Most of our lunches were bologna sandwiches, and if we wanted a hot lunch, then it was fried bologna on toast. The milk we drank came out of a box. You didn't pour it, you scooped it. It was powdered milk, and you mixed it with water. And if there was ever a couple extra bucks, my mom would go out and buy what we would call real milk, but then she'd come home and mix it with a half a gallon of the powdered milk in order to try and stretch it out. You know, the problems, the challenge in my life wasn't being poor, it was violence. I was the oldest of the 5, well, I was the oldest boy of the 5, and I was my father's favorite target. My brothers and sisters didn't get out unscathed. There was plenty of mental and emotional abuse. One day we're sitting at the table for dinner, and I, like many kids, didn't want to eat my vegetables. You could understand, it's a big old pile of lima beans. And my father's insisting that I eat them, and I'm declining to eat them. And eventually I just sit back in my chair and I cross my arms. And, you know, I never saw my father put his fork down. But in a flash, bam, and my head is bouncing off the corner of the table with so much force that it snapped me back up into my chair. I'm frozen, holding my breath. Everybody else is frozen. And without missing a beat, my father picked up his fork and just started eating again and never said a word. I didn't let myself move until everybody was gone, but part of the way through the rest of the dinner, I let my eyes just drift to the right to look at my mom to see what she was going to do. And she sat there, head in her hand. I think she felt as helpless as I did. When I was in kindergarten, I was molested by an older boy in town. And, you know, it was a spring night. The sun was staying out longer, and I came to the playground to play, and this kid was there, and a couple of his friends. And as the early evening wore on, he molested me. When I went to school on Monday, I'm walking to school, I'm in kindergarten, I'm 6 years old. All of a sudden, I'm getting an awful lot of attention from the older kids. Now, they never paid attention to me before, but they were this day. And they were yelling out to me, "Hey, go blow me. Come on over here. Go blow me. How you doing?" And I didn't understand why they were distorting my name, and I'm like, I got to get into the school. This was just too much attention. So eventually, the bell rang and get into the school, and I'm thinking I'll be safe in the room. A few minutes later, the principal knocks on the door and asks for me to come out in the hall, and I go out there, and he says to me, "Mark, did something happen this weekend?" And I said, no, I didn't know what he was fishing for. And so he continued to ask questions. I continued to say nothing happened. And he's getting more and more intense. Eventually, he says, "Mark, something happened Friday. What did you do?" And in an instant, it all snapped into place, and the blood's rushing into my head, and my ears feel like they're on fire, and the tears start rolling. And it's one of those cries where your chest is heaving, and you can't hardly talk. And so I try to explain, getting 1 or 2 words out per breath, and eventually I finish. And the principal bends forward so he can get down to eye level with me, and he says, "Mark, you can't ever do that again. Do you understand me?" And with that, I came to think that me being molested was my fault. He told face and go back in the room. That was the end of that conversation. There was never an investigation, no police, no adult ever spoke to me about it again. There was one conversation that happened in my home, and it was my mom and dad talking, my dad in the living room, my mom in the kitchen, and they're talking through the doorway. I knew they were talking about me, and I'm eavesdropping, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I realized it had something to do with what happened. And as the conversation comes to a close, my father's final words were, "That's just great. My kid's a fucking homo." I had no idea what those words meant. I was 6 years old. I was in kindergarten. But, you know, as I got older, I came to understand what they meant. And when my dad said them, I could feel like the contempt just dripping off of him. And I knew it wasn't good. And so as I got older, I started to question myself, like who I am, my identity. I started to wonder, am I gay? I didn't have those feelings, but am I? I mean, my father said so. And that seed had been planted in my mind. And so with it came a lot of self-doubt. I bought into a lie in those early years of my life that no one's going to protect you. You're not safe. Pain's going to come and you can't do anything about it. One of my father's favorite sayings with me was, "You're not worth the powder to blow you to hell." And he said it for so many years. But as I got older, I'm wondering, like, what does that really mean? And I asked him, he says, well, if I took enough bullets and I emptied the gunpowder out of them, and I had a pile of gunpowder big enough to blow you up, that would have been a waste of perfectly good bullets. I'm thinking, does he want me dead? Am I not worth a few bucks? I mean, like, there was all this confusion. It was all twisted up in my head because I couldn't imagine that my father saying this to me. I loved my parents like crazy. All I wanted to do was be with my dad. I wanted their validation and approval and their love. But they weren't very capable of dishing that out. I ended up on a path of self-destruction. And by the age of 6, I was smoking cigarettes. Not the age of 6, sorry, 6th grade. 6th grade, I was smoking cigarettes. That would have been a feat, huh? 7th grade, I'm drinking, smoking weed, and I would snort anything I could get up my nose. 8th grade, I became sexually active. Behavior issues galore, fights. By the time I'm 18, I end up in jail, and at 20, I joined the military. And I joined the military because I needed to figure out who I was. I was searching for this identity because the identity I had was so distorted, and there was so much pain with it. I wanted to become somebody or something else. While I was in the military, I did a good job. I spent 9.5 years on active duty. And during that time, while I was overseas, I took up martial arts and I poured myself into it. I loved it. Because in the martial arts, I found all the things I didn't have. Calm, peace, strength. Nobody could hurt me. And so I did really well in both areas. When I got out of the military, I left with a couple of medals. No heroism. There was no war going on at that time, but I was being recognized for the good work I did. I went to figure out how to have a successful martial arts school, how to become a really great teacher, and I succeeded at that. And by the end of my 30s, I had nearly a 7-figure-a-year business. And by the beginning of my 40s, I torched it to the ground. I went from 800 students to 65. You can't outrun your past. Like when there's something that's big enough, profound enough that you're holding on to it and trying to drag it forward with you, it just doesn't work. You bring that idea of who you are into the present, and it's a dangerous place to be. You know, I said I never wanted to be a father. When I was 40 years old, I had a relationship with a woman, and I had called it off. 2 weeks later, she comes knocking on my door and wants to get back together. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. And then she says, well, I'm pregnant. And I'm thinking, no, this can't be happening. Like, not only are we done, I couldn't imagine anything good coming from me. I thought my seed was dark. I thought my seed was so dark that I asked her to terminate that pregnancy. Luckily, she didn't. 6 weeks shy of my 41st birthday, I became a first-time dad. And my son, Joshua, was born. And in the first few moments of holding him in my arm, my whole world changed, literally. I'm sitting here looking at this little guy, and I'm thinking, oh my God, he's so beautiful. Like, he was perfect. His fingers, his nose, like everything was just perfect. And I'm thinking, 9 months ago, he didn't even exist, and now he's here. And then all these emotions are coming up, love and joy and awe and this sense of responsibility. And I realized I want to be the best dad that I can be to him. And I was resolved to make that happen. And over the years, things went great. I loved watching him grow, and it was interesting in the beginning to just see his consciousness and awareness show up, and then his personality kind of blossom and start to unfold. When he was 9 months old, he started to walk. When he was 10 months old, he started to use words. I had been teaching him baby sign language, and I would call his mom up to check in on him, and she would put on speakerphone, and then I would say, "Hey, buddy, did you eat dinner?" And then he would do the sign for food, and then I would ask him, "All right, so did you take a bath yet?" And then he'd do the sign for wash, and his mom would be saying what he was doing. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm having a conversation with this kid in sign language. You got a clean diaper on, you got to go to bed. You pat his little bottom with the diaper. It was awesome. It was just so cool. You know, this commitment to be a dad, to be a good dad, there was still a conflict. One day I called my mom, and Josh was maybe 16 months old, and I said, "Mom, you know, I'm looking at Josh, and I'm kind of confused. Because I love him so much, like I can't imagine doing to him the things that happen in our house." And my mom paused a few seconds, and she says, "Well, you know, there's no good explanation for a lot of things that happen there." At any rate, Josh kept growing and getting smarter and stronger. The more ninja weapons he could get his hands on, the happier he was. When he was about 3.5 years old, he comes bouncing into the living room, and he says, "Daddy, why are you so proud of me?" And I'm like, "Well, because you're my son and I love you." And he says, "Okay." And then he goes bounding back into his bedroom and playing. And I'm sitting there kind of dumbfounded, like, how does a 3.5-year-old come up with a question like that? You know, sometimes in life, when we make a commitment to become something new or something better or someone else in a positive way, it seems like God or the universe is. It seems like God or the universe kind of presses back and puts up some resistance and some hurdles. And it's as if to say, did you really mean what you said? Were you really serious about that commitment? And so when Josh was 3 years and 8 months old, I get a phone call one morning. It was a Friday in August. And the voice on the other end of the phone says, Josh, his mother had been in an accident. And then his mom was fine, but that Josh was unconscious and in the pediatric ICU. So I went in and told my staff what I knew, and I jumped in my truck to head to the hospital. And, you know, I was scared. I'm telling myself, you gotta stay focused. You don't know anything. This could be nothing. Maybe he's just, you know, knocked out a little bit. He's gonna wake up in a couple hours. He'll be fine. But my gut was like, no, I don't know if that's the truth. My head's getting buzzed up. And so, like many of us do in a time of crisis, I prayed. praying with every fiber of my being. God, please make it okay. Please put him back together. I don't know what's wrong, but just make this okay. See, this little guy that had exposed me to being able to see myself in a different light, because when I looked at him, I saw me, and I'm loving him. But I had all this internal conflict of who I was and how unworthy I was. And here I was really scared for myself, like, what if something happens to him and he's gone? So I I continue my journey to the hospital, and I get there, and I start to feel panic again just because I couldn't find the door to get in. Eventually I find it in the help desk, and I go to get some directions. They tell me where he is, and it's up an escalator, down a hall, to an elevator, up again, and then through some hallways, and I get to the pediatric ICU door. Go in, and I ask the nurse where he's at. She says, oh, he's in the 4th room on the left. And so I head down the corridor, and when I open up the curtain, that's what he looked like. He was on life support. That's a ventilator keeping his lungs going. The doctors didn't have any real information in terms of his injury. He had suffered a global traumatic brain injury. Both hemispheres, all the lobes of the brainstem, everything had been damaged. It was like shaken baby syndrome. There was bruising, there was swelling, and there was fluids developing. He had been the victim of a hit-and-run car accident with 2 semi-trucks. Did we miss a slide? Pointing at the screen trying to change it. No? Nothing. Okay. Well, it was supposed to be a photograph of the car. It was a Chevy Cavalier. It had been a hit-and-run accident with 2 semi-trucks. The first driver kept on rolling, the second driver stopped. The doctors had no good news. They couldn't tell anything because in a brain injury, it's not like, even if you have a broken arm and it's broken in 17 places, it's really, screws and plates, and they kind of put you back together. But brain injuries are not like that. They're very unique, and his was profound. And when the neurosurgeon showed up, he said, if Josh makes it the first 7 days, he's probably going to survive. And believe it or not, they gave me some hope, because I was like, there's my first mile marker. But all the doctors' eyes were empty. And so that first day, visitors come and they show up, and they're bringing teddy bears, and they're bringing food, and they're bringing good wishes, and then they're being optimistic, and they're like, Mark, man, he's going to be okay. He's a tough kid. And I can agree that he was a tough kid, but I nodded politely, but my stomach's still telling me, like, this is way bigger. And eventually, when all the visitors left, I was so happy, because now I could just be alone with my son. I thought maybe he was scared. I didn't know what was going on inside his brain. And I knelt down next to the bed and I hold his arm. I'm like, dude, you're in the hospital, man. You got a bump on your head. Okay? And all the different sounds you're hearing and whatever you're feeling and smelling, it's just people moving around here trying to make you better. It's going to be okay, man. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here until you get better. We'll go home together, so don't worry about nothing. Josh made it through the first week. A rehab doctor comes in to consult and says, well, we can take him in. We can try. I can't promise anything. And I asked the doctor, Doc, could this be how he is in that bed in that room? Could this be as good as it gets? And he says, yes. He may never walk or talk or eat on his own again. And I was like, okay, I know where the bottom's at. Let's get busy. And so they put a feeding tube in him so he could get nourishment and food and water and meds. And he was still unconscious and unresponsive. He gets transferred to the rehab hospital, and he starts with 7 hours of therapy a day. And I got to tell you, it is the most amazing thing to watch these professionals work with this little guy, trying to get his body and his brain to come back together. He couldn't swallow his own spit at that time. A newborn baby could survive better than him. He couldn't suckle a bottle. He could stick hypodermics in him all day long. He never flinched. You know, as the first couple of months rolled on, I was starting to get fatigued. And I could feel my energy waning. And I knew I had to be there for him. And so I'm like, how are you going to do this, man? You can't fade. You gotta be here. I'd been sleeping there. I showered there. I ate there. People brought my clean laundry to and from. And I'm looking at him like, okay, I can't fail him. He needs to know somebody's here. And I'm thinking, what do I do? And this quote comes to my mind, and it's always remember in the dark what you know to be true in the light. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know, there's some dark stuff here. Like, he's in a coma. He can't move. He's unresponsive. We don't know where this is going to end. But in my heart, I was going to choose to believe in some light. Like, this is possible. There's something here better. And so I took that message, I put it on a pink post-it note, and I slapped it up on the door, and I forced myself to read that day in and day out so I wouldn't lose focus on what I was there for, and I could maintain my energy. Eventually, after 4 months, Josh left the hospital. We were able to take him home. I'd like to tell you everything was fixed, but it wasn't. He still, even to this day, has challenges. He's 15 years old, and he reads on a first grade level and does math on a first grade level. He, the brightest spot in his life now is his spirit. He's happy, he tries to fit in. That was just a couple months ago. Yet this morning I get a call from his teacher, and he's jonesing at school, so we agreed to let him go home to Grandpa's and hang out for the day. You know, we're not always prepared for the challenges in life. And things blew into my life that I didn't want, that were inconvenient, that I didn't like. The childhood, this accident when my son got hurt. You know, the funny thing is, I started to heal myself. Not when I started to feel love from somebody, but when I felt love for somebody. Like, that shifted me. That I was able to love my son and see him as perfect. And eventually that led to me seeing myself, like, in that same moments, at that same ages. Like, I was not inherently broken. There wasn't something desperately wrong with me. A couple years ago, I started to get a little fatigued again, and I realized I didn't have the same passion and enthusiasm to help Josh with his recovery. I had just gotten worn out. My tank had run dry. You see, you can't give to somebody else what you don't have. One day I'm looking through some photos, and I see these photos of me as a little guy, and I'm like, man, look at that smile. He's so happy, cute kid. But I came to this one photo, and it was my 4th grade school photo. And when I looked at that, like, my eyes would bounce off of it. I couldn't stand to see that picture of myself. And sometimes, you know, when pain hits us, we want to run the other way. But I've learned that sometimes you have to sit with those things, and you have to let them kind of wash over you. And then when your emotions calm down, then you can actually see what's there. You can see the truth, and you might even find the value. So I kept staring at that picture. And after a while, the anger keeps churning up, and I realized I hate that kid. Like, I had come to hate myself somehow. But I kept looking, and I kept looking, and then as those emotions moved through, then I started to feel something different, and it was compassion, and it was understanding. And it wasn't just for myself. Eventually it rolled on over to my parents, And then the judgment and the anger and the bitterness started to melt away, and I started to feel love. And it dawned on me that if I was hating that kid, then I sure couldn't love him. And yet that kid is me, that's part of me. And I realized I'm going to have to give to him, myself, what somebody else either couldn't or wouldn't. You know, we often run in, we find our destiny on the road that we took to avoid it, and that's what happened with my son. I tried to not be a dad, and yet it was that set me free, started to set me free, and ultimately did set me free. You guys familiar with bonsai trees? I love them. But the ones that come in the trays aren't the real ones, these are. They're the ones that the Chinese would see in the mountains where they lived. And these trees are just pine trees, but because of where they are in the very difficult conditions, the wind shapes them into something that's unique and special. The DNA is still a pine tree, but the events around it turn it into something unique and desirable. And I see that as us. When we're born, our DNA is good. We were made perfectly for whatever was going to come up in our lives. We have what it takes. We just have to discover that we really do matter. We got to learn to nurture and nourish ourselves. You know, when you look up the word love in the dictionary, it's a feeling, it's an emotion. But I think that does a terrible disservice to the word love or the concept. Love is an action. It's a verb. And if you love something, you are required, I believe you are required to take action. It's not a static event. It's full participation. So I have a question for you. Who do you love? Who do you love? You've heard the saying, love your neighbor as yourself. How well can you love your neighbor or your spouse or your kids if you run out of, if that tank goes empty inside it for yourself? So I challenge you today. I challenge you today to look at your own past, look at your current events, it doesn't matter, but to see yourself as not inherently broken, not even partially broken. You matter. All of you matters. All of you has always mattered, and you always will matter. Radical honesty is the pathway there to see yourself as complete and whole. So I challenge you again, who do you love? I challenge you to love them more by learning to love yourself. My name's Goblowsky, and I'm living proof that our history doesn't define our future, that we get to choose. I believe in the power of love to change the world, and I believe in you. Thank you.
All right, guys, is that great? All right, we're going to take a 15-minute break. Please be back in 15, what is it, 11:30 now. Be back at 11:45. Our next speaker is outstanding.